Hey, everybody, Harvest in the Morning, WNBC, WNBC, WNBC. No, it's Midnight Edge After Dark. How's it going, everybody? I'm, of course, your Nary Supreme, Mr. Rob Robot Shlomo, coming to you from Shabby Road Studios. And with me, as always, Mr. Tom Connors.
Good evening.
Yes. And with us is, as you can tell by our theme music, your favorite YouTube harpy, the Ninja Viking Warrior Princess, whatever she is this week.
Whatever I'm this week.
Incandescent. Emmy award-winning.
And a Zagat award-winning chef, Miss Mecca Random. Yeah, her intro just
cooking yet, so I don't know. How do you know? I've only seen
I'll give you the
pictures.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we have a special guest with us today to join us for this very special episode. TJR Music's own TJ. How are you doing, sir?
Doing good. Yes, thank you for having me here.
You may recognize him from his own videos. If you haven't checked him out yet, we have the link in the description, so please do so. He does some great coverage over there. Very well balanced. I watch his videos all the time. He covers everything from mainly music, but also covers entertainment avenues, everything from movies to even done some Star Trek videos, I believe.
Yes, we did my sister and I did a huge discussion on the pilot episode where we analyzed it. The video is probably longer than the actual episode.
We know how that is. Our roundtables end up being longer than the movies and shows we watching.
Now, when you refer to the pilot episode, do you mean Where No Man Has Gone Before or The Cage?
Cage.
Okay, there we go. All right, we're off to a good start here already. So.
We're pretty much a Trek channel most of the time.
Seems to be that way sometimes. But yeah, so tonight, though, we're going to talk a little different things other than Trek, even though we may have... you go by TJ, right?
Yes.
I should have asked you that before the show, but yeah.
Okay.
Although we may have to have TJ back sometime to talk about other things other than music. Tonight, we are going to talk about music, and that's why he's here especially. And the big reason is something that's actually not a good thing. You may have been following this yourself if you've listened to us on Midnight's Edge After Dark or followed TJR Music's channel, then you know what we're talking about. And that is the Universal Music Group fire that happened a decade ago, and we're just learning now all of what was lost in that fire. So in this special, we're going to just go through a little bit of the background of what happened, what was lost, and what it all means for the future of those artists that pretty much lost a lot of their, or if not all of their music. And a lot of these artists are completely are gone. And not only that, they had complete music collections from different, we'll get into all that later, but yeah, but thank you so much, Captain. Here to start off with, we got a $2 super chat. Rob, you forgot the true pilot, the Vulcan hello.
Oh, please.
No Star Trek.
You mean the truly bad pilot? You mean that's what you mean? I mean, oh God!
Let's not talk about Discovery.
Let's not take it. Otherwise, we'll be here all night discussing this. Jeez. All right. Let's get back on topic.
Yes. So, Rob, why don't you give us a little bit of background? I've got the New York Times article there for you to start with. I think that covers quite a bit of it. We like I said, we did talk about this on the show. If you have seen it before, but we're going to recover just a little bit of it right now for everybody, just in case they haven't. So,
all right. Well, back in 2008, there was a fire on the premises of Universal Studios. Now that fires happen all the time, but fortunately, the warehouse that caught fire was where they were storing quite a number of masters in the Universal Music Group's library. And we're talking, this is not insubstantial sum of recorded works. We're talking, Bo Diddley, Tom Petty, Nirvana. I mean,
Elton John.
There is a huge Elton John. There is a huge body of work that was lost. And for a better part of a decade, Universal attempted to cover it up. Oh, no, it wasn't that bad. And only recently now has it come to light exactly the extent of the damage. and I believe was Nirvana is actually suing Universal for damages, and they covered it up pretty much for insurance purposes.
Yeah, we'll get into that a
To
little
try
bit
to
more
cash in on-
detail. Yeah. But yeah, well, there's a list of bands that we went through and included some newer ones like, well, I don't call them newer, but more modern bands like Nirvana and Guns N' Roses, I think were also mentioned. So there's a lot of question as to what was that?
Yeah, over 100,000 masters were
Right.
lost, and estimated 500,000 song titles burned.
And there were some very
So-
old blues titles and other ones and some other ones in there that we didn't mention offhand. But yeah, so TJ, what was your initial reaction to this? You did a great video about it, and I think it was even in your video where you had said you talked to somebody who were like, yeah, like they're in this little podunk town with a little insurance company, but they still have this state-of-the-art system to save all their records in case of a fire, right?
Yeah, when I first heard about this, I was talking to a friend who works for a small little insurance company. And they actually keep their records for this little podunk, you know, I should say podunk, but this small insurance company of their clients.
Sorry, that was my word.
They have this technology in the room where they store everything, where if a fire starts, all the oxygen is sucked out. So that fire can't damage the records and these are insurance records. That's all they are, insurance records. I'm not saying that's not important, but it's not as culturally important as what was lost in this fire. And if a little, and I'm going to use the word podunk. I like that word, actually. If a little podunk insurance company, not a major corporation, can afford to have this kind of technology for their insurance records, which it's their clients, it's their customers, so they value this, why couldn't, my friend who told me, when I told her about this, she said to me, we do this, she said, why couldn't Universal? They're this huge multi-conglomerate, there are basically 3 companies that own all the music labels in the world, here in America. Maybe I shouldn't say the world, but here in America, all the major labels, there's 3 major labels at this point now. Why couldn't they do this? Why couldn't they take better care of these masters? Why couldn't they take better care of the artists whose masters they own?
Right, and that's a good place.
It's like I was going to say, just for clarification, the 3 ones are Universal. Is it still BMG?
Universal,
Sony
Music Group, and Warner Music Group.
Sony Music. Okay, I'm dating myself by saying BMG.
I said this on our original video, but that shows how much Rob listens. But yeah, no, BMG I believe was bought up by Sony, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Those 3 entities pretty much own everything. So in some cases, an entire record label's catalog was lost in that fire. It's estimated that Chess Records, for instance, Universal owns the entire Chess Records catalog now. At one point in time, Chess Records was a separate label. Like many, they bought them. So it's believed that everything that Chess Records, their entire recorded output, it was ruined in that fire.
Yeah, and Buddy Holly was another one we didn't mention up front that really was like, wow. And I went and checked all my Buddy Holly CDs to see how they said they were remastered and stuff like that, and they were carefully worded on some of them. So I think that the one was definitely after the fire.
Yeah, and there's definitely one thing that as I was preparing for this yesterday, I talked to a couple friends who are recording engineers, and when CDs first came along, we didn't have Pro Tools, we didn't have the type of digital technology we had. So if say an artist like Buddy Holly, if his CDs were if they did CDs during like the 80s and 90s prior to us having Pro Tools, that sort of thing, then that means that all we have for a backup of Buddy Holly are those CD copies, because those things were not backed up digitally then on Pro Tools. And that's one of the big questions we want, that has to be asked is, when Universal says they backed up a lot of this stuff, well, how did you back it up exactly? And maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but
no, that's a good point. Yeah, that's something we're going to move into, because that was one of the the comments, and I'm sure you got a few like it in one of our original videos about it, that really kind of prompted me to want to do this video. Is they're like, oh, well, they backed them up digitally, they're fine. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that they won't come up with something better in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And then now those original masters are stuck in an inferior digital master that won't be compatible with whatever it is they want to do to upgrade it. And that could cause some issues. And then just think about even 20 years, 25 years down the line, how much different,
they're going off a photocopy of a photocopy.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, like you're pointing out. Yeah. Sorry, Mecca.
Yeah. You're losing a lot of quality when you do that. So even if they do have that, they might be able, and like you said, they might be able to master it better. And that's the other thing is, well, we'll get into it more. Like what didn't they ever put on CD? What didn't they ever take off of the original tapes and the original masters?
Right. And that's something that reminded me of a story I seen years ago. And I wonder if it's connected to this. But there's a group of people who have been collecting all these old blues records and stuff because they had said something about the masters didn't exist anymore. So they were cataloging them all in like this, I don't know if you call it like a museum, but like if you needed to get a hold of them, this is like the closest thing to the master they have. And I wonder if that was connected to that, if these people were already aware that these things were gone and you couldn't get a hold of them now. And to be also clear, as far as digital goes, yeah, a lot of the later albums, generally about by 1995, any major artist was probably doing their albums in digital. Now, what that means is those files are limited to whatever they were at the time as far as what they can get out of them for, quality. Now, what we're really worried about would be anything that was done analog on any multi-track, because then you're losing the ability to go back to the original multi-tracks and get the separate tracks, which is something that's been, to me, one of the best things that's happened in music in years. And this is just recent, is that they've gone back and remixed and in a way of remastering instead of just going back to the old two-track masters that were made for records.
Each individual track, each individual instrument, you can go and clean up, tweak it, make it sound as good as it can, and then you can put them all back together to however you want to sound. I mean, some people want it to sound like it did on the radio sometimes, but you want it as clean and crisp and as good, and yeah.
Well, what that does is, like Mecca says, is if depending on what kind of technology we have at the time, it may be able to capture the actual essence of that analog recording much better than something we have now. Now, when we first brought this up, I had the Imagine from last year, and I think the one from 2009, I think was the last time they remastered it, and just the world of difference that a decade made in that remaster, because the newer one was completely remixed from the original multi-track, and I believe the 2009 master would have been from the 2-track masters back in the day. You may know more about that, TJ, because I think I watched you talked about that, I think, in the past too, the Imagine remasters at all. Have you talked about those?
No, but I did talk about the Beatles remix.
Oh yeah, that's right. The White Album. Yes.
You're dead on with what you're saying, because when you have the original multi-track recordings, and this is something else that was lost in these fires, is the multi-track recordings. And to back up even further, if you listen to the 80s remasters of the Beatles when they were first put on CD, they're going off the 2-track stereo master. And then, but back then we didn't have stuff like Pro Tools. We didn't have the ability to like put all the tracks, save them all digitally the way they can now. They did it off of that. They sounded better than the records. They did sound really good, real crisp and clear. Then in 2009, there was a world of difference between the 80s remasters and the 2009 remasters of the Beatles catalog. But now they can back up, at this point now, they can back up every single individual track digitally, which is what they did. That's how they did stuff like the Love soundtrack. And there's another one that escapes my mind.
They did one of, I think they did in the remaster of Sgt. Pepper. They've got the 5.1 mix in there, so they would have had to do it for that one.
That's how they can do the 5.1 mixes now, because they can literally digitize every single track, make a digital back of it in the best possible quality, and they can now do a lot of things with that, and they can create these remixes that are like a revelation to hear.
Did you ever hear Randy Bachman when he told the story about when he went to Abbey Road Studios? and he said, the engineer said to him, "We have all the Beatles masters loaded into Pro Tools. What do you want to hear?" He said, "I want to hear." He said, "I want to hear the opening chord to A Hard Day's Night." And he broke it down into each individual. He goes, Paul plays an F, George plays a C, but a diminished ninth, and John plays an F, and it was just incredible the way he broke it down. That's just an example of what you could do now, though. That's really, just the technology today has just evolved to that point.
And if, say, the Beatles' original master tapes had been destroyed after the 80s remasters, that's all we'd have. You can't really make too much of an improvement on that. You have to go back to the original source tape to make what were the 2009 remasters, to be able to make those. You have to go back to, and to make the multi-tracks, to make digital copies of all the multi-tracks so that you can do the remix and the 5.1 mix like we've had over the last 2 years of the White Album and Sgt. Pepper. You have to be able to have those to be able to do that. We wouldn't have any of that right now. If those
and I remember telling Rob when I got the White Album, I'm like, dude, I'm hearing stuff I never heard before. You know, it's like it was mind blowing at how just that 5.1 mix brings out everything you've never heard, and you're just like, wow, it's a whole new experience. And the Pink Floyd albums were that way too. They did some great mixes on those, I thought. Even the old quad mixes were all right, but yeah.
No, just for clarification, the master recordings are almost always stored on the studio premises. Is that correct? I mean, they do have. I mean, or are they locked away in Iron
Mountain? They weren't in the case of Universal Music. Apparently, they weren't.
Yeah,
because there have been thousands upon thousands of master the two-track stereo masters, which is what you make all the copies from. You record, and for the people who may not understand everything, who may not be musicians, who may not have studied this, we don't want to assume that people know everything.
Right.
When you record, and I'm going to say it real simply, when you record, you multi-track. You have one track for guitar, one track for bass, one track for vocals, one track for backup vocals. This is basic stuff. And you mix it together and you create a two-track stereo master. That two-track stereo master is what you make all either your vinyl copies or your CD copies off of. Lose that, and you no longer have the original to make copies from or to remaster from. So when audio technology improves like it did with the Beatles catalog from the 80s to 2009, we are able to do a lot more with remastering in 2009 than we could in the late 80s or mid 80s when those came out. And if you don't have that original master tape, you can't do that as technology progresses. You can't do that.
I remember back in 2000 when it was 2009 when the Beatles Rock Band game was released. I had a lot of gamers who really didn't know anything about music. They would say, well, why can't they? Because in order to work on it, they would have to fly the engineers and people and the specialists to London, and they would have to live in London to work on everything because the master tapes are stored at Abbey Road Studios. And they would just say, well, why can't they just send the masters to LA to work on them? And I would tell them it doesn't work like that because the master tapes don't leave Abbey Road Studios. Oh, but why can't they? Why can't they do that? I said because if something happens to them, then any future,
game over,
it's game over, Oh, but nothing would happen, but
it's like it's just not a Van Gogh.
Yeah,
right. And thank you for bringing that up. And this is what I was going to compare this to. It's like a million pieces of art were to go up in flames all at once. That's what this is the equivalent to.
Blue catching fire, really.
Yeah, and I hate to use this, but it's like the 9/11 of music or the Hindenburg of music, the Titanic of music. It's one of the biggest tragedies to ever happen to music. This is worse than anything you could possibly imagine, because even worse than any artist dying, because at least when an artist dies, we still have what music they've brought us. In this case, we don't have many hundreds of artists, if not thousands of artists, if not more than that. Dozens of thousands of artists.
It's akin to the Library of Alexandria being sacked. Alexandria.
Yeah.
Talk about.
But yeah, I mean, this is just the amount of stuff that was lost. I mean, here's a perfect example. We already have a type of technology for sound that has come out since this fire that is a perfect example of why this is a bad thing. Dolby Atmos has become a thing now. What if musicians are like, wait a minute, this is basically the equivalent of 3D sound? What if somebody like Pink Floyd and all that decides to start doing this and it becomes a big thing? All the other artists are going to want to do it. A lot of these artists are not going to be able to do it because they're hindered by whatever technology the master was done in at the time it was done. So they can't go and actually do what they need to make it truly the immersive, full, experience. I don't know what you feel about that, but I think that's a good example, TJ, of something that's just recent that they can't do now, probably.
As the ability to remaster an album or to remix an album improves, you have to have those original master tapes to be able to do that. Otherwise, that recording is stuck in the time that it was last remastered. So if Chuck Berry's catalog has not, and I don't know if this is true, I'm just saying this as an example.
Yeah.
If Chuck Berry's, which I believe his catalog was also lost in this.
I think
If the last thing we did with Chuck Berry's catalog was just master it to CD prior to the digital revolution, prior to Pro Tools, which I keep using as kind of the benchmark, then that CD 2-track stereo master is the best we're ever going to have from that time period, like the 80s or the 90s. That's the best we're ever going to get. And if new technology comes along that can make that better, it can't be adapted to it. It really can't. You have to have those original. You have to have those original tapes, or at the very best, you have to have those original tapes backed up with the up to the latest digital, up to what's the best that we have now digitally. Which I think a lot of this stuff wasn't. Is the sad thing.
Right.
Every single Beatle multi-track, every single individual multi-track is backed up digitally, to the best it can be. So if something ever does happen to those tapes, we've got these digital multi-tracks here. But with a lot of the rest of the stuff, that's not the case. Even if it's a 2-track, even if it was recorded back when all you had was 2 tracks, if that wasn't digitally backed up, then, we're really screwed as far as when technology improves.
Right. And we've even just finally reached a point where we've been able to finally, not completely, but we're getting close, I think. Some people will argue, but I think we're getting close. I don't think we're there yet of getting all the nuances of analog and digital yet. There's still some areas it's just not as good, I don't think.
Yeah, closer and closer all the time.
Yeah, it's getting there. Yeah. So, I mean, we kind of did this out of order, but let's move on to the next bit here. No. It's totally fine because this is the most important part of this conversation. The rest of this is just kind of like legalese and BS. Now, there's probably going to be a huge civil suit, I would imagine, and not only just the artists, but even possibly us customers, depending on how certain things were sold to us. Because, perfect example, wasn't it just 2 years ago? I think it was that Guns N' Roses had
yes,
Appetite for Destruction remastered, and they claimed that was from the original analogs. Now, were those I'm assuming then those weren't among the ones that were lost in this fire, or did they lie to us? And that's something I think a lot of people are going to be asking about that and many other albums. So why don't we move to that part? Did you want to take the lead on this part, Rob, and then hand it over to TJ, or did you have anything to add to the other part, Mecca, before we do move on? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I think we covered it.
Okay, I didn't want to leave you out if you did.
No, it's fine.
Okay. So yeah, let's talk about the legal repercussions of this situation, Rob. I think there's one specifically there that I sent you about the possible class action lawsuit, if you want to kind of gander at that and give us an overview of that real quick before we get into that conversation. Rob. Did we lose you, Rob?
You might be muted accidentally.
Yeah, I muted my mic. Yeah, I do that.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Okay, we still got Rob.
Well, anyways, from New York Times, actually, from June 21st of this year, artists sue Universal Music Group over losses in 2008 fire. That's what we're talking about here. A group of high-profile pop musicians in the States sued Universal Music Group on Friday over 2008 fire to destroy thousands of archived recordings, but according to the lawsuit, was never disclosed to the artists. The suit was filed in Los Angeles by rock bands Soundgarden and Hole. The singer-songwriter Steve Earle, the estate of Tupac Shakur, and former wife of Tom Petty. It is the first legal fallout from a New York Times magazine investigation that had found the fire at a backlot warehouse at Universal Studios Hollywood had destroyed over 100,000 audio recordings that contained as many as 500,000 songs. According to the article published this month, lost assets included many master tapes, the original recordings from which albums and singles are made, by some of the most famous names in music history, from Ray Charles, Chuck Berry, and Elton John to The Police and Nirvana and The Roots. Suit accuses Universal, the biggest record company in the world, of breaching its contracts with artists by failing to properly protect the tapes. It also argues that Universal had the duty to share any income received as settlements from the fire, including insurance payment and legal settlement from NBC Universal, the parent company of Universal Studios at the time. The claim seeks damages of excess of $100 million. It goes on and on and on.
Right,
I mean,
right. You don't have to read the whole thing, but that's basically what brings us in. James gave us a super chat a little bit ago for $2 and says, insurance fraud, anybody? Thank you, James, for that super chat. But yeah, that's basically kind of what we're looking at here is Universal cashed in on the insurance on this, and it was really just some random amount, I believe, they came up with, because what was lost was irreplaceable and priceless. Yeah, like Micah was about to say there. Sorry, and this is where we're at now. Is they're looking at it as they got a big paycheck for all this stuff being gone, and the artists are out all their masters, and not only that, the money that was brought in because of this, and any certain future possible monetary gain that could be brought from any kind of remasters that we just talked about. You know, for instance, like if they wanted to do a Dolby Atmos master, like we just talked about, they can't do that now. They are out that revenue. They can sue Universal for that technically. If they would win or not is up to the courts. So, TJ, what is your take on this whole legal situation now where we're at? Because this is kind of where everything's at this moment.
Well, I really do. Well, first of all, I hope that more artists join. First of all.
Yeah, me too.
I hope that the more artists will jump into the fray and also do the same thing. And like you said, I'd be curious to know, what albums did they reissue, saying from the original master tapes that weren't? I'd be curious to know. And how can we know? That's the other thing. How can we know? There needs to be an accounting of this. And that's the thing. If you read the New York Times article, the author says we may never know exactly what was lost, simply because Universal did not use any type of well-organized inventory system, that their system for keeping track of everything was haphazard at best. There are multiple lists with holes in them. There are multiple lists that don't tell us everything that was there. So we may never know exactly what was lost. That's why I hope more artists will jump into the fray. I'm not a lawyer, but I can see some serious lawsuits happening. I can see some serious class action lawsuits happening. And for once, I hope that the lawyers really jump on this. I hope that the lawyers help people start class action lawsuits against them.
Right. Yeah, because that's the thing. And there is a story I do have here that claims Universal does have a list possibly, but I don't know how accurate that news is, if Rob wants to kind of check that out while we're talking here. But again, like you said, this is a situation where if your music is gone, now, if anybody wants kind of an idea of what this is like in a grand scale, in a way, kind of, I guess. Remember when DVDs first started coming out, and certain ones had, deleted scenes and all this other behind the scenes footage, and some of them didn't. And sometimes it wasn't because they just, didn't want to put it on there. It's because they didn't have it. Because you had a lot of studios that would change hands, or especially before the 70s, they would just toss stuff. They would toss masters of films. They would toss all the deleted scenes, because they would just toss it willy-nilly, not figuring anybody would want to use this stuff again in the future. Now, luckily, most music companies kept all their stuff. So normally that's not such an issue. But now we have an issue to where, like, if an artist wants to go back and listen to all and get it and release all of their unreleased demos or songs that were never completed, and I think that's what spurned some of this was certain artists were going back and wanted to get a hold of some of their B-sides and other things they never used and deleted tracks and everything, and they couldn't get them. I'm trying to remember who it was that started this, but I believe it was a blues artist or somebody like that, or a rapper. I can't remember who it was now. If you remember it all, TJ, but
there were a number of artists who once this news broke, there were a number of artists who then began to recount how a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 4 years ago, they tried getting a hold of Universal saying, hey, we're going to do a reissue. We want to get the master tapes so that we can, re-release this. We also want to get some of our alternate versions of the songs because we want to put that on the 2 CD release that we're going to do, the anniversary release, and Universal avoided them. One individual that Universal, it turns out, confided with about it was Richard Carpenter of the Carpenters.
Yeah, that was another one. Yep.
Yeah, he said it wasn't easy. He had to call and call and call. He had to bother, pester, until finally someone told him they're lost, they're gone. But he didn't even know. He didn't even know after they admitted it to him the extent that of everyone else whose music is now gone. That he didn't know that. And yeah, that's the other thing we've lost in this is all the potential alternate takes.
Oh God.
All those potential bonus tracks, demos, all of that.
See, that's one of the things I loved on like the Birds and the Jefferson Airplane, sort of like the 5 packs that they had. I know Tom's got a lot of those too, where they like would issue all like the first 5 albums of a band, and then they'd have an entire basically album's worth of alternate takes, demos, just B-sides, all these things. And that's something for me as a music geek. I love those. I love diving into, well, what else did you record for this?
Yeah, me too. That's why I loved getting those 50th anniversary Sgt. Pepper and White. It's because of all the bonus tracks, all the studio takes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I love
a lot of those good box sets too. Oh my God.
Yes. Oh, there's so many great ones, and that's the thing, is all the potential of those were lost. Now, luckily, I know like Elton John had done quite a few reissues a few years ago that had a lot of that kind of stuff on it. So that tells me that a lot of his kind of stuff was probably backed up. And some people might be wondering, well, why would Elton John have his masters in America? He's a British artist. Well, I believe most of his stuff was done in America, right, TJ? I think that's the case with him. I have to be honest. I'm not 100% sure where. But if not, with Universal owns it, they probably moved it to America anyway. Yeah.
They bought the record label that a lot of that stuff was recorded back when it was originally recorded.
Right, right.
Elton probably recorded somewhat, some in the US, some in the UK. But the label owned those masters. And when that label got bought by Universal Music, they took those masters in-house.
Yeah, and I know Elton's been digital since at least 87 or 88, somewhere in that region. So his are probably, it's just all the older stuff that's probably been destroyed, which is I'm not even going
to. Here's something I want to bring up. Another thing, which artists, there are going to be certain artists that Universal Music Group would have said, these artists, it's worth the investment to digitally back up everything and to maybe do it more than once.
And that's probably what, 5-10%?
Do it and do it again when technology improves.
Right.
Every 5 years or so. There might be a few artists, because Universal said, well, we didn't lose everything. We've got some of it backed up. They're trying to say it's not as bad as we think it is. And there might be some artists who they feel have the potential to keep reselling their catalogs, but you're right. That's probably maybe 5 or 10% at best. There's a ton of artists that I'm sure they have not backed up, besides just simply when they were first re-released on CD, maybe during the 80s and 90s.
Right. That's just it. A lot of them never did.
Yeah. And
how many blues and jazz and artists that are older than 40s, 50s, 60s artists that didn't make their way to CD?
Mm-hmm. Another tremendous loss is there are always going to be artists like, say, Nick Drake, who's a good example, where during his time, his music is not really noticed. It's like you're a Van Gogh of music. But then after their death, sometime after their death, their music begins to gather a following. And that leads to being able to a label deciding, well, it's commercially viable to re-release this person's music. Let's go back to the original master tapes and let's remaster it and re-release it. And so in the future, if someone like that is discovered through old vinyl records that people have, we don't have those tapes anymore.
Right.
And that's another huge loss that, people don't even think about until that person's music is rediscovered. But I'm sorry, we're getting. I think I pulled things off track here.
No. We're still basically on track. And here's another part of the legal part I wanted to bring up. Besides, we'll get into customers in a moment. We did talk a little bit about that already. But this was something that was presented to me by somebody who actually grew up in the music business, had family in the music business their whole life, and worked with bands and everything else. And they were bringing up the whole thing with the whole masters and ownership of the masters, because basically they were kind of presenting the idea of the real simplification of, if it goes back to the whole Prince deal with when he changed his name too. And I'm not trying to complicate this, but I hope people get what I'm saying, to where holding the original masters is everything. If these companies don't have the original masters, does that bring in the question of whether they can even say that they own the copyright on these technically anymore, because they don't have the masters? Is that something that's a possibility? Do you know anything about that, TJ or Rob? I mean, in this instance, I would bring you into this because you may know a little bit about this too.
No, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know anything. Wouldn't watch about that.
I think there is a difference between owning there's like owning the copyright, owning the publishing, and owning the masters.
Right.
While I'm not a legal expert, owning the masters allows you to decide. Well, of course, so does owning the copyright. Owning the copyright gives you the right to make copies.
Yes. Yeah.
Copyright. But owning the masters allows you to make copies from the original source material, which,
right,
like you said, where you want to go, because otherwise you're making a copy of a copy.
Right. And that was one thing with Prince's issue, was he wanted the original copies. He wanted the original masters.
Mm-hmm.
And to him, that was the big deal. And that's what this person, when I was presenting basically the same thing back to them, where I don't think that matters. But this could bring up a possibility where the artists say that they're negligent enough to where this could bring up stuff in the future. And with the way music is going now anyway, most artists are independent with internet now, the newer artists anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, are a lot of these artists maybe possibly have some grounds to stand on to fight to get their, not only their original masters, but like with movies now, I don't know if you're aware of this law. If an original creator wants the rights back to a franchise that they sold 35 years ago, if they're the sole creator or creators, they can fight for those rights back from a studio. Now, could we possibly see some law like that maybe be brought into effect over some kind of civil suit with the music industry that may put the rights back into the artist's hands after so long, so they can protect their masters? Do you see something like that happening? That's what I brought up as a scenario more so.
I would think that I could see it happening, and I have read speculation on this. I could definitely see where, in the case of Universal, where artists or the artist's estate could say, you no longer own the masters, so you no longer have a right to make the copies because you no longer own them. So the copyrights would revert back to the artists or the estates, and then they.
I think that's where that person was coming from. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think there's a good point to be made there. However, Sony Music Group, Warner Music Group could say, well, we still have the masters. We're taking good care of them.
Right.
We were negligent. So that doesn't apply to us. I could see where they could argue that back.
It could put their feet over the coals a little bit, though, too, at the same time. And hold them accountable, like artists will be like, well, where's our stuff? And turning to them. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, no. You bring up a good point. That's the thing, is you're going to have a lot of artists saying, well, if because Warner, Universal saying it's not as bad. That article is way overplaying it. It's not as bad as they're saying it. So like Rick Beato said in his video about this, these artists all need to come forward and say, then show me the masters. Show them to me. I want to see them. And if they can't produce them, then these artists and their estates might have ground to stand on to say, then you don't own this anymore. And I don't know, maybe, and there is the speculation that courts could say, well, since they don't own it anymore, I guess it's in the public domain now. That's another possibility.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too. And I mean, that could backfire on the artists as well in a way.
It could, although there are some artists and some estates that would say, well, I'd rather it be public domain.
Yeah, because they don't see any money from it anyway, pennies.
Right.
So we might as well just, make it public domain. There's, I think none of us are legal experts. We can speculate. And a lot of people have speculated and have brought up these same points. All of this, I think all we can say is all of this is possible.
Right, and that does need to be pointed out. Thank you again for bringing that up. We are none of us here legal experts, so yes.
But I hope it happens. You know,
I feel like there's a revolution on the way. I do. And okay, so let's talk a little bit about us as the customers. Now, I mean, it made me go through a lot of my CDs, start reading, does it say mastered from the original album? You know, all the Universal Music ones I knew I had. You know, I got to question that. So is there then that also opens the door for a possible civil suit with the customers? But again, the sad part about these kind of civil suits, we're going to see a $5 gift certificate.
Yeah.
TJ knows what I'm talking about. Rob probably knows what I'm talking about. Mecca, you probably had this too, where you get some random thing like there's been a civil suit. Here's your $5.
Right. Yeah. It's a big chunk out of their pocket, but yeah, if the wheels just see like $5. But you know, it's the principle. You know, and maybe some of them are very carefully worded. You know, maybe they don't say anything about original master tapes, which would then that means, well, we didn't lie about it. We didn't say they were from the original master tapes, but if they did say that, then they're screwed. You know, if this took place in the fire, and those masters cannot be visually shown, you know, no one can see them.
Right, because I read a lot of them, like my Buddy Holly one. I think I'm trying to remember how. I'd have to go grab it, but I'm trying to remember how it's worded on there. It doesn't say the original masters, but it says carefully remastered from. I believe it says the 2-track master or something like that. Or not the master, but source. Yeah, something like that. To where it's like it's really strangely worded. Sorry. Yeah.
And you know, someone. It's funny. I did have a conversation with another musician who mentioned a remaster they did, and I'm going to see if I can. I think it might have been Bo Diddley. I'm not 100% sure, but it was one of the legendary blues artists. Where he said that an engineer said who'd worked on a remastering of that artist's music after that fire said, no, I had the original master tapes. I'm pretty sure those were the original master tapes that we worked from. And it was one of the artists named, but who knows, he may have been lied to. It could have been what we call a safety master.
Yes.
Or a safety copy.
Yes. That's something you should bring up, and that's important. So if you want to expand on that, go ahead.
Copy, a safety master, and I'll use the Beatles again as an example. When the Beatles would record their music at Abbey Road Studios in England, and then of course Parlophone Records would then make records and distribute them in the UK from that 2-track stereo master. But when it came time to be released by Capitol Records back in the day, they wouldn't manufacture out vinyl records and then ship them to America. That's just too cost inefficient. They would make what's called a safety master off their original master tape. They'd make basically a copy of it, send that to America, and then they would then make copies of it. Now, a safety master, if it's done well, if it's done carefully, can be made with very little audio quality loss. There's going to be some audio quality loss, but with minimal, depending on how well it was done. It could also be done very sloppily, and it would lose a lot of quality. And a good example of that would be is if you listen to there was a Capitol Records, the Beatles Capitol Records box set.
Yes.
I'm trying to think, came out somewhere between the 80s and the 2009 remasters that had the original Capitol versions of the albums in those configurations. And some of those CDs sound absolutely horrible. And I mean horrible. Even to the 1980s remasters. You compare them to the 1980s remasters, and you're like, oh my God, the difference is night and day. These sound horrible. That would be an example of copies made off of a bad safety master, a safety copy.
Right.
If you ever hear those, you can't find them. They're out of print now. You might find them on eBay. But even if you have the box set of, like, say, Sgt. Pepper, there is the US 45 version of Penny Lane included, and it is horrible sounding. I asked when in my review, I said, why the hell did they include this? This is awful. Except to show you how badly things were reproduced when they were shipped over.
Right. And then not only that, I think they remix the stereo tracks and everything like that when they got to Capitol.
Sometimes, they remix things differently. There was that as well.
They would use that famous fake stereo that all the vocals will be isolated in the right channel and the instruments will all be isolated in the left channel.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I think I have one of the Capitol CDs from back in the day, and it is horrible. You're right.
It just depends on how good that safety copy was. So, he said maybe he had a safety copy. I don't know. And once again, when Universal says they had stuff backed up, well, how did you back it up? Is the backup the CD remaster you did in the 80s? Is it a safety copy of the original 2-track stereo master? How good is that safety copy?
Yep.
Or once Pro Tools became common, did you back up everything in Pro Tools? Did you back up all those individual tracks? And as technology improved and we could get better, contain more information, did you do it again? How far did you get?
Yeah, I mean the safest we can probably bet, and again I'm speculating, of course, is since this happened in 2008. By then, MP3s and digital music had come on the scene, I think. So,
yeah,
chances are a lot of the major artists, but again, this goes to that 5-10% of that 100,000, masters lost that were actually backed up. But again, they're stuck in that whatever best quality they were at that time. And a good question as to what was and what isn't, because some of the Nirvana stuff, I'm willing to bet they did digitally after they got bigger. I don't know how much of their stuff would have been analog, so it's stuck in whatever form they did at that time, whatever bit rate they did it. And I'm just stunned at how much they can just sit there and say, "Oh, it's no big deal. The artist will still get paid." Like this was just nothing, like it was their just nonchalant answer to this was just the worst, I think, to me. That was a kick in the nuts, to be blunt about it. I don't know how to kind of bring it back around to that part of it, because this is where I think we're at right now, is that they basically hid this for years and years and years, and they're still trying to cover it up in a way, I feel like.
Now, that's what keeps bothering me about this. When they say, it's not as bad as they're saying, we have more of it backed up than people realize. Well, then why did you cover it up? Why did you say because when the fire first broke, the news media covered it, and they said nothing of any significant value was lost.
And not only that, wasn't this like the third fire there in a matter of a couple of years? Somebody had said in one of the reports, I believe, if I'm not misquoting.
I don't remember anything about that in the New York Times article. I could be.
It might have been in one of the other reports, but I think it was like the third fire in that area, because it burnt down, including the one that burnt down the set for Back to the Future.
You may very well be right.
Because it was the same set they used for Back to the Future and for Gremlins and like one or two other movies, and that's gone. And that was around the same time period. And the reason these fires started was because of the roof that they had. They would go up and what's the process called? I can't remember. But they sit there and they heat up the. Do you know, Rob?
About that. And I have to say, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What are you talking about, Tom? They
Well, what started the fire? It was the roof. It was they go up there and they heat it up, and they thought that it was cool enough or whatever, and then ended up starting the fire. TJ sounds like he knows more about it.
I remember vaguely what you're saying. I remember reading about it, but what I was going to state was I'd have to look at the article again. There was some sort of maintenance they do where they heat up the roof. I know it sounds weird. I can't remember the specifics of it. I would remind also anybody watching, after you're done watching this video, go and Google New York Times Universal Music Fire and read the original New York Times article, because it's very extensive, and read all of it. I would have to go back to the article to actually explain about that whole aspect of the fire. But yeah, it was some sort of regular thing that they did where they had to heat up the roof for some reason, as I recall. But
something weather-wise. I'm trying to look it up now.
If someone can, I don't have access to it here, but yeah, I would just recommend that everybody go read that. But there may have been multiple fires in that area. But then it comes back to, like I said, with like my friend who works for the little insurance company, they felt it was important enough to have technology that would suck all the air out of their storage facility where they keep all their insurance records. Why couldn't Universal think that these recorded masters were as important?
Yeah, that's where the negligence comes in, and that's where I'm like, these are as important as, any painting that would be hanging in any museum from any artist. To me, is just as important, or even more in some cases, because so much more was lost.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I agree with your analogy of it's as if, you know, master like thousands of masterpieces in the Louvre caught fire, you know, and we lost Van Goghs, we lost Renoirs, we lost all these different paintings by all these different great artists. We lost thousands of them all at once. It's like that, you know. We have copies of them. You know, we have these CDs, thankfully, and you know, these copies. But like I said, we don't have the originals to go back to as our technology to give us a better presentation of this music evolves. We don't have a master copy to go back to.
Yeah, so I do suggest, if you're curious, we're not going to go through the list of artists now because we're running short on time. We were going to talk about that a little bit, but the list is so extensive that we'd never be able to read it all. It'd take us like 20 minutes just to go through the list, probably.
Yeah. Tom, it's actually, I'm looking at Wikipedia. The fire started when a worker was using a blowtorch to warm asphalt shingles being applied to the facade. Yeah.
There you go.
Which
Some kind of maintenance. Yeah.
It's not uncommon to heat up asphalt shingles, but usually you don't. I don't think you'd use a blowtorch commonly to do it, but I don't know. That's what they were doing.
And the workers, I'm sure, had no clue what was in that storage facility.
Doesn't sound like anybody really did.
They were just hired to do a job.
Yeah.
I mean,
very few people actually knew what was stored there. And in the article, it talks about there was one individual, his name escapes me, who basically kind of was in charge of that, of taking care of those masters. And for a long time, he was silent about it. And then he finally did break down and said, "Yeah, we lost all this." And that was to the author of the article here, Judy. Wait a minute, I'm saying the name. Jody, sorry, not Judy. Jody Rosen, who was the New York Times contributor who wrote the article. There was an individual who worked for Universal who no longer works for them now, who his job was to take care of those masters. And he says it just, to this day, he is just devastated by what's happened.
Even Leonard Nimoy's on here.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, if you look at that list, you're going to find people that you're like, when you see their names, you're going to say, you know, holy shit, we lost that.
Even the Simpsons. So that means they lost Simpsons singing the blues, I bet. Spinal Tap is on there.
Yeah, the list goes Jimmy Buffett, Joan Baez.
I didn't see half of these before. This is the newer list.
Water,
this list is from the end of June. I didn't see this list. This is a lot more names than I've seen before.
R.E.M., Queen Latifah, Sammy Davis Jr., Snoop Dogg, Sonic Youth.
Wow, Paul Williams. Just
the Eagles.
Rob Zombie. Yeah, the Eagles was one I remember was in before. There's some names on here I don't remember seeing before.
Yeah. And there's also artists that they don't even there are lots of obscure artists that were lost.
Mm-hmm. See, now REM, they just did a bunch of remasters here too. I should go look at those. I know they're not as popular with some of the people around here, but yeah.
Maybe REM was considered important enough to back everything up digitally.
Yeah.
Everything, every little track, everything, In which case the loss is not as bad.
But still, Meatloaf.
Yeah.
Wow. See, and some of these are Sony artists, so I'm wondering what the deal is. There's a lot of these that are Sony artists.
I would be curious to know here. Who knows?
I mean, I know some of them jump ship here and there. That's a plausibility, but
some of them do switch labels. So it might have been when they were with, or it might have been when they were on it. Because, like I said, like Steely Dan, for instance, Steely Dan was on ABC Records initially. They were initially released on ABC Records, but then Universal bought ABC Records. So maybe at some point an artist was on Sony, but then they switched to Universal, and so they got the masters somehow. Who knows? Maybe that was part of the deal. I don't know. There's a lot of intertwining politics, business deals, that sort of thing. But
Neil Diamond, Bo Diddley, Sammy Davis, I think has been mentioned before.
Yeah, there's just so much stuff.
Wow. And again, the one that's sad is the ones we'll never know about. Never.
Yeah.
I mean, there's whole, like you said, Cheech and Chong is on here. Jesus. Wow.
It's a crime.
Well, that explains why Cheech was probably lip syncing "Earache My Eye" at the last concert I saw. They probably didn't have the multi-track anymore to where he could get it without the vocals. I bet that's probably a good bet because they sang everything else.
Uh-huh. Huh. He lip synced "Earache My Eye."
Yep.
Okay.
He had the whole get up and everything on, but because it was just them, so they didn't have anything but the two guitars.
Oh,
So I
okay.
understand why they used the backup for that song particularly, but
Yeah.
I can see why he possibly couldn't have just sang to it because they sang everything else. So
Huh.
yeah, unless that's just out of his range now, possibly. That's always a possibility. But anyway, we're getting into kind of like shop talk there. But yeah, there's even artists like Bryan Adams, Aerosmith, or Big Al, big names here that it's like they're here though, so it makes you wonder why they would be here. Because you would think their entire catalogs would be backed up. Of course, some of these, like Aerosmith, are here because of the Geffen deal.
Mhm.
And a lot of the Geffen titles are big ones. That's where Nirvana falls in here. That's where Guns N' Roses falls in here. So that brings us back around again to, what was saved where and how they're selling it. And that's where it really kind of made me wonder, because I hadn't bought, that was one of the ones I hadn't picked up yet, was the Guns N' Roses remastered. And didn't you pick that one up? Did you do a review of that one? I can't recall now.
I picked it up, but I never reviewed it. I want to go back now. Hopefully, I still have, because they put that on when you buy it, it's shrink wrapped, and there's that little plastic sticker on there that says, gives you some of that info remastered from this. But I'll have to check the credits and just see where it was remastered, if they state original master tapes anywhere.
I want to say the record I seen at Walmart said remastered from the original analog masters.
Huh. Okay. And it just depends. Like I said, it may not have been stored there. Hard to say. It may, like I said, someone was telling me that the Beatles catalog was owned by Universal Music Group. I was like, really? Are you sure? And I never got to confirm that. But if so, they like I said, they were those that.
Do you know if they own like maybe just distribution locally, but that doesn't mean they have the actual masters, I bet, because those are all over in England. You know that.
Well, the Beatles, the publishing rights are now owned by Sony. I know that.
Oh, that's right, with the Michael Jackson deal. Duh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because Michael Jackson leveraged half the Beatle catalog, the publishing rights, for his big comeback. Remember a number of years ago? He had that big comeback effort, and he leveraged half of the rights. And then Sony, 2015 maybe, paid $750 million for the rest of them, for the other 50%. So Sony has it now, which is why we now see help turn up in commercials for Google. So, so they're gonna use it. They got it. They're gonna use it for all it's worth.
Yeah. When Michael Jackson had it, he used it for all it was worth too.
Oh yeah, well, it's an asset. It's
yeah.
If I owned it, I'd be making money off it.
I'd argue that the Beatles catalog is the most lucrative catalog in history. So I mean, that's just one, and that's what I'm saying here. As far as a lot of these other groups, is like, you got to imagine people like Elton John and Axl Rose and all these people are going to start poking their heads in here pretty soon, and that's when I think this thing is really going to turn the tide.
Well, Beatles, possibly Sinatra, because Sinatra turns up in more movies and stuff like that, commercials, movies.
Well, yeah, that's because Michael wanted so much for the rights to the Beatles. That's why for years you didn't hear Beatles anywhere.
You heard it in a few commercials. There were a few times I remember I heard it in commercials. Michael needs money was what I would think. Michael needs money, so there we go. It's in a potato chip commercial, and or some kind of commercial.
Well, I just know it was always a pain in the butt to get them for movies. They'd usually do re-recordings because it was cheaper to do it that way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I hope more, like I said, I just hope more jump into the fray and take part in this. And I think they all just need to say, where are our masters? Show them to us. Show them. If there's nothing to worry about, show it. Let us see it.
I think so. Yeah, that's the only thing that's going to really change anything in the public perception of this right now, because a lot of people out there just aren't even aware, I think, of what was lost. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this special, was I felt like there's a large part of the community that doesn't even understand and you guys listening now might better so, and hopefully so. But yeah, that was the point of this, is that we understand that this was big. This is a big deal. I mean, I don't know what else to compare it to than what I did earlier, which I don't like to, because those are actual tragedies where people died. But in a way, people's histories died here. I mean, it makes me sick to my stomach. I've never seen a tragedy like this in any entertainment area outside of like somebody dying, that really hit me like this, to where it's like, wow, all that was lost.
I think what's so sad about it is, when the fire at Notre Dame happened, everybody, the world recognized the
Right?
loss
Yeah.
of Notre Dame. But when this story was broken, most of the world doesn't recognize the loss. They're saying, "Well, I've got it on CD. Can we just make more copies of this? I can hear it on Spotify. In very compressed audio."
Yeah.
I don't think they realize the importance of this, and what we've lost, and what it means for the future of being able to represent these releases as technology improves. And it is as if thousands of paintings in the Louvre were burned and destroyed, and all we have left now are photographs of them.
And some of them we don't. That's the bad part. That's the part I really want to bring up to people, is that there's some things that we'll never know was lost.
Yeah.
Entire
right.
catalogs, So Mecca, you've been real quiet. Give us your feelings on this situation. I know this impacts you deeply, because you, like all of us here, are huge music fans.
Well, it's what I said earlier with you don't know what alternate takes or different versions of things. Like maybe they'll have a slow version of something that was a really fast song and it sounds a million times better 20 years later down the road with music constantly evolving. And that's what's so upsetting to me, is all the stuff that we haven't heard yet and that we'll never get to hear. And I think that's really what's more impactful to me, is what demo versions, what songs that they only have one version of that they never wrote down anywhere.
Unreleased songs that we've never heard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's what spawned a lot of this. I keep saying spurned instead of spawned. I know what I mean, but I don't say the right thing. Spawned a lot of this is when artists wanted to share, and they wanted to show us what they didn't use and what they didn't release. And it's like, wow, it's like if they had 3 different versions of the Mona Lisa we never got to see before the one before the one we did, and how much different would they be? And these songs change. I mean, you can listen to anybody's demos compared to what they are when they're on the album to know kind of an idea of what is missing and what we're losing. Rob, what are your thoughts on this? Kind of final thoughts, because we'll probably wrap this up here. How is this impacting you so far?
Well, so far it's one of those things that you're not going to notice what the impact is until you go and try to find something. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing about somebody, until that day where you say, hey, I wonder what about, that's the one that was lost in the fire. Oh, and then it starts to set in. So we're not going to really feel the effects of this for a while. And like I said, so far we have to, like I said, this does feel like I said, the Louvre has been burned down, or the Library of Alexandria has been sacked. I mean, this is a great historical and cultural loss for music and for art in general.
I agree. And I agree with all those sentiments, and Mecca's too, because I'm one who's really into the, outtakes and everything as well, and B-sides and whatnot. And so TJ, again, everybody check out his channel. It's great, especially if you're a music lover. You'll enjoy everything he's got there. What are your final thoughts on this? Yeah, no problem. I do appreciate your channel. Like I said, I check out your stuff a lot of times before I buy certain things. So
thank you. I'm deeply saddened. I'm very angry that Universal covered this up. I'm very angry at how flippant they've been about it. I'm sad for the loss. And like Mecca, I mean, I live for those studio outtakes. You know, those things mean a lot to me when those things get released. And like you said, there's going to be a lot of like Steely Dan, one of my favorite artists. There's been a remaster of Steely Dan, but there's never been like a comprehensive, like deluxe editions of their albums with alternate takes and all this stuff. And I may never get to hear that now. And I'm betting I never will get to hear any of that now because it's probably gone.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those kind of things right now are what keeping the physical media alive.
Yes,
Because if it
they are.
wasn't for those box sets, nobody's buying CDs anymore. The record albums have been selling better than in the last few years than CDs ever have. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, most of you out there who are getting into vinyl don't realize how crappy a lot of those masters are, because they're either from some old crappy master or they're digital anyway. So you might as well just have the CD. I'll be honest with you guys. You're not getting anything out of them unless they say they're mastered from the original analog album. You're better off just buying a CD.
Well, even the 120 or 180 gram vinyl that they've got it printed on, it's like, yeah, but you're still using a little cracker box record player.
Well, that too. You have people that'll buy these expensive records and play them on junk record players, and I get people. I appreciate people wanting to do that, but sometimes it's like, it reminds me of when I used to walk in, and still walk into people's houses and their TV's all squished with black bars everywhere, and they've got that motion crap on. It's like, turn it off. You know, like, turn it off. You can't have that on. The director would kill you if they walked in and fixed the black bars. Here you go. You know, your picture looks much better now. And it's the same thing when I walk in and I see somebody with one of those. What's one of those suitcase record players they got now? Somebody help me out.
A Crosley.
Crosley, there's a good one. Yeah, not a good one, but a good answer. Where people get these Crosleys and they spend hundreds of dollars on a record set, and it's like, you guys realize you're just ruining your record, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a lot to be a record collector and actually treat your records with care. And if it's something you really want to invest your time in, I do suggest actually looking up videos and stuff like that, and TJR Music's a good place to start, and other places, there's a few out there, I'm sure, where they get into it and get into the care and handling of records, and not only that, what the best kind of record players to buy and stuff like that, because most people just buy junk, I see anymore, and it's just it's sad.
Well,
So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts
I
on it.
don't understand why they go in and buy they'll buy like the record at Barnes and Noble or Walmart or even, and I'm like, I had this like 20 years ago and I got rid of it because it sounded like crap. Just give the CD, you can hear more stuff on it sometimes.
Yeah, well, it all depends on what kind of, and this harkens right back to what we were talking about, and I'm sure TJ can add more to this too, is what kind of care was taken into the original masters. Because when it comes to records, unlike a CD, pretty much every 400 to 500 records that are done, they do a completely new master of the what's it called, the lacquer? Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like every time they do one of those, it could be slightly different than the one before. Depends on who's overseeing it and everything like that. So it could sound a little different than the last 500. And when you don't know if you're buying one of the ones that's, print number 20 or 206, and 206 is going to sound a hell of a lot worse than print number 20 does. I guarantee you. It's just, it's the nature of the beast, unfortunately, when it comes to analog technology. And tapes were always the same way back in the day. You could get, a really good master on a good day if they had a good master. But if that tape's been run 500 times off the master until they started doing things digitally, you get a really bad sounding tape back in the day, I remember. Or if you got tapes from BMG, they were always like second-rate masters and sounded like crap. And I'm even starting to wonder, I don't know if anybody knows about this, if BMG even did their own masters of CDs back in the day, because I swear I've bought in CDs again where the tracks start in different places. A good example was Prince's Symbol album, to bring him in again, the Love Symbol or whatever you want to call that album. I swear that the track started in slightly different spots in my old BMG copy than the one I bought just recently. That was it was from the same era, but it was a store-bought copy because it didn't have the BMG symbol on the back. I don't know if you've noticed any of these things, guys, as music collectors, but this is just some random things I've noticed. And it's like, it makes me wonder what version I have, what master I have, where it came from, and what quality it is. Because I'll sit there and listen to my different CDs and notice differences sometimes, and it's like, but they shouldn't be any different. You know, so yeah, I don't know if you got anything to say to that, but yeah.
Well, there was a period of time when CD technology first came along when they did just simply transfer the audio to CD, but they didn't do anything to remaster it for CD. They didn't do anything to get rid of noise. If they took it from be it the original 2-track stereo master or a safety copy or whatever, they didn't do anything to remove tape hiss or anything. And that would, like, a good example would be like when the Zeppelin was first released on CD, it was just simply just taking the audio and just transferring it to CD, nothing else. And then somewhere later, there was that first Led Zeppelin box set sometime later where Jimmy Page supervised the remaster. And there was a huge noticeable difference between those. And yeah, so it just depends on when you got it at that time. I think these days, the standard is better. The main thing we have to worry about nowadays with CDs is just, how overcompressed it is. Sometimes while the album is recorded digitally, the CD mastering is way more compressed than the vinyl mastering.
That part's true, yes.
More dynamic range when you hear it. And that's why people are attracted to the vinyl, because they put it on, you feel the emotion of the performance because there's more dynamic range that you don't feel as much on the CD. Sometimes I've noticed there's no difference. And I've talked about this in other videos I've done.
Yeah, you do some great videos on this. So I do say check out your videos on this.
It just depends. And you have to just sometimes compare A to B. There are some great web online resources where they keep a database of a score chart of, lossless copy versus vinyl versus CD, and you can kind of get an idea whether or not it's worth getting on vinyl versus CD.
Oh yeah, and then there's Discog and places like that where you can look up different versions and different releases, and I've learned to use that too in my adventure through music in the last few years.
And I think Google the dynamic range database.
I'll have to check that one out.
They don't have everything, but they have a lot there, and you can find most artists, most major, most not so major artists, and you can find a scoring between the CD and the vinyl and lossless copy, flat files, that sort of thing, and you can get an idea of that as far as help you make a decision. So,
yeah, because I've heard a lot, and your reviews included, where there's been a big difference, and some of them are done really well, some aren't, and again, it just all goes into the process of this is a technology that's old, but it hasn't been very popular in years. So now all these places that used to make them don't have the people they used to that actually knew how to use this technology. Yeah, I mean, it's so ancient, and in a way, not to make it sound like it is, but it is. Where there's a lot of people out there who don't even know how to do it anymore. And I know there's been a lot of people who've complained, and some of these companies have stepped it up, even the records themselves, where you'll get a lot of crappy scratched right out of the package records. And I've had that happen to me a couple times now. And try taking a record back to Best Buy. It is not easy, folks.
Yeah.
And they will not make it easy for you. As compared to other stuff. So I mean, it's tough for music lovers nowadays. I would say tougher than it's ever been, and better in some ways when it comes to vinyl. But like people like Mecca who aren't really into vinyl, I get that, because I have my issues with vinyl. I hate the skips. I hate the maintenance sometimes. It's a pain.
CDs can sound great if you master them right.
Right. Oh yeah, and I love and that's the thing is I have a habit of making sure I have both. Mm-hmm. Just in case, something happens to one or the other, there's that aspect too. But then there's instances where there's things that still have not been on CD that I have on vinyl that probably never will see CD ever. And that's sad, but it's just the way it works, guys. And to kind of wrap this up, I mean, all you music lovers out there, definitely check out his channel for any questions you might have on this and other music things. I'm sure it's covered there, or he can help point you in the right direction in most videos. TJ does a great job of that.
Read that New York Times article.
Yes, definitely read that article if you haven't already. And I'll actually put those all in the links, as many as I can find here in the description when I'm done here, so you guys can have access to all those easier than trying to dig it all up yourselves. But again, I want to thank TJ for all your time here tonight. This has been great.
Thank you guys for having me.
It's a bad reason we're here, but
yeah. Hopefully we can get back together under happier circumstances.
Definitely, if you had some fun with us, you have to come back for one of the regular shows where we really let loose and get wild and have fun.
Okay.
So, yeah, we can talk some Star Trek and everything else. There's always something to talk about. So, again, thank you so much. Do check out TJ's channel if you don't already know about it. I can't recommend it enough.
If you don't mind me saying, just youtube.com/TJR the original.
And do you also have a website you'd like to plug, or anything else going on that you want to plug?
It's just the YouTube. I do have a website from back when I was a working professional musician, but it's kind of it's just dormant right now. I am gonna create a new website soon. So I've been saying, and hopefully I will.
Right.
But just the YouTube channel.
All right. Well, like I said, we definitely got to have you back here again soon, and it's been informative. And I hate using like the word fun because it's not a good reason we're here.
No.
You know, but
you, Rob, and Mech, it's been enjoyable to have conversation with you folks. It's not enjoyable to talk about what we're talking about, but it needs to be. More people need to know about it. Everybody needs to spread the word about it.
Yes.
And you need to understand why this is important, because not enough people care. There hasn't been enough outrage about it.
And one of the main reasons I have you here today, and to express to everybody out there, do check out your videos on this. And those are definitely ones that are more shareable than some of our stuff, because our reporting of this is buried at the end of other podcasts and stuff that we've done in the past. So unfortunately, our coverage of it hasn't been the best as far as out there for everybody to get as yours has. But you break it down so well that I think that I'd recommend people check you out. And if you can, share the video of his, and then this could probably get some views too, because then we'll bring up this one in some other future videos, I'm sure. As far as this is something we're going to talk about again, is what I'm trying to get to without.
So yeah.
This is like just the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
We're waiting.
Yeah, the smoke may have died down 10 years ago, but this is just starting, folks. So do check out that channel. Check out all our other friends. Do check out Mecha Random. Why don't you tell them about yourself?
I am Mecha Random 42, and I complain about things a lot. And I'll be at Star Trek Las Vegas. We have a hangout, and please, if you guys are out there, meet us at the Millennium Fandom Bar. It is at 8 p.m., I believe.
Saturday, yes. 8 p.m., I believe, yes.
Friday.
Or is it Friday? Friday, yes. Sorry, Friday. I said that wrong. Hopefully I'll be there if I make it.
If you don't, I quit.
Huh?
If you don't, I quit.
I know, right? Oh, I'll get there and come hell or high water, however it's said. Okay, so anyway, Rob, take us out of here.
Yes, if you like what we do, like, subscribe, click the bell icon, hit our main channel, like, subscribe, click the bell icon over there. Check us out on Patreon. We got all kinds of bonuses, bloopers, outtakes, lost episodes, my 10-minute stand-up set, behind the edge making videos, and more. You can also check us out on Subscribestar, and you can support the channel through Patreon as well. Not Patreon, I said that already. Through PayPal as well. And as always, if you don't have the means to support us financially, click like, subscribe, share with your friends. And as always, we cannot do this without you. We'd like to thank TJ for showing up tonight. And thank you for joining us to talk about this.
Thank you.
No. Thank you. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us tonight. And we will catch you next time.
Try to let everybody know what's going on with Las Vegas this week. We'll try and post a schedule. So.
Yeah, we're trying to post a schedule. Yeah, we'll be at Star Trek Las Vegas this week. We'll catch you out there. We're gonna be doing a fan meetup on Saturday?
Friday.
She just said it Friday, Rob.
Yeah. Right. We'll let you know more.
Yes, we'll definitely post some more info on that soon. Take care, everybody. Sorry.
Take care, everybody.
Interrupt the exit.
I'm Krispy Kreme McDonald's.
I like big Asian butts, and I cannot lie.